once he got really going with it.
And success begins to wreck his world.
Maybe it's a story of broken hearts.
Vincent everything he wanted in the 70s, including a romance with a teenager that turned into a 20-year thrill ride between heaven and hell.
Joy and I have been deeply in love since the get-go, but we were a case study in crisis management.
Jan-Michael Vincent was in demand in the mid-70s, starring in one high-profile movie after another, like Baby Blue Marine and Hooper. But the part that came closest to real life was his role in Big Wednesday.
I ran with a beach crowd, so they were a strange combination. They weren't your peace and love hippies. They were a rowdy bunch.
Robert Englund had a role in Big Wednesday and remembers the mood in the 70s. The part that came closest to real life was his role in Big Wednesday.
I ran with a beach crowd, so they were a strange combination of, they weren't your peace and love hippies. They were a rowdy bunch.
Robert Englund had a role in Big Wednesday and remembers the mood in the 70s.
The drug of choice, if there was a drug of choice, was a little bit of marijuana, you know, and a cold Heineken. The colder the better. That was sort of like the buzz, you know.
But the drinks and the drugs fueling that buzz would get stronger for Jan in the years ahead, and the results would drop him from A-list studio films into a string of quick, low-budget acting jobs. His father noticed the change long before it hurt his son's career.
Jan has always been generous, really generous, but he got into himself a lot more. Once he got really going with it, wasn't the same young guy.
That shift took a toll on Jan's home life with Bonnie.
They had great times together, and then I guess they didn't. And the relationship just deteriorated, I guess.
The golden couple that was supposed to last forever broke up, and Jan took the split hard.
I know when he broke up with his first wife, that that was a time of disappointment and distress. They were a very happy couple. I'm aware of some things that have happened subsequently, and maybe it's a story of broken hearts. You know, maybe that's what it is.
Bonnie was the one he should have stayed with Bonnie.
Jan lived the single life for a few years. Then, when he was a 30-something movie star, he met a teenage high school student half his age at a party on the beach.
He was a great surfer, funny, sweet, extremely tan.
Jan and Joanne Robinson started seeing each other on the sly.
We dated for a couple of years before I got found out. I got in a lot of trouble.
Her parents tried to stop her from seeing such an older man, but Joanne kept sneaking off with Jan. He helped her cut her high school classes and spend the day surfing. At first, their life together seemed like an endless summer of fun.
We had it was a blast. He could always afford everything, and there was never a question of what, we wanted to do, whether it was anything. Everyone loved him. So did the bottle.
The long party kept rolling, but the fun was starting to fade. And so was the gleam on Jan's stardom.
Remember last time I talked to you what I said it'd happen if I caught you out here again?
As the 70s came to a close, the best roles were eluding one of that decade's top stars.
He knew where he sort of fit into the picture, sort of strong, silent type, I think he had this sense that maybe his kind of star, and I think he's wrong about this, but I think that his kind of stardom, was going out of fashion maybe, or he imagined that.
Times were changing, and Jan-Michael Vincent would have to change with them.
The great Gazinga say, never a day go by without trying something new. He teach Nanu the ways of life.
But the pressure he put on himself would turn him into a different person, a person who could shatter the people that loved him. When the E! True Hollywood story continues, Jan-Michael Vincent tries to turn his life around with a wedding, while starring in a TV series makes a bad problem worse.
And finally, Jan passed out. And one of the guys said, you know, the wrong cripple is in the wheelchair.
As the 80s began, Jan-Michael Vincent's film career was slowing down. But his personal life was speeding into the danger zone, and one of the reasons was alcohol. In 1983, Jan was put on probation for driving under the influence in Malibu. But that same year, as his career seemed to be sinking, he got a huge boost in a new direction. Jan's role in the television miniseries Winds of War helped make that show a hit, and led to another TV job as the leading man in the weekly series Airwolf, co-starring with Ernest Borgnine and Deborah Pratt.
Jan had a mystery to him that camera liked. Jan was one of those rare people that camera just liked. And it really didn't matter what he did, camera saw who he was.
But there was one thing about Jan the camera overlooked.
Even though he had tried very hard to clean up his act, and his agents and his managers and all these people had vouched for him, saying that he was clean and that he wasn't drinking or doing drugs. He was. He wasn't sneaky about it. He would come in with a 12-ounce tumbler and a good shot of vodka and cranberry juice, and that was breakfast in the morning. And by afternoon, he was pretty far gone.
When Jan drank too much, Assistant Director Peter Jordan came up with creative solutions to keep production rolling.
He showed up with blood on his face and cuts and a little bit beat up from the previous night and totally unconscious. And he wouldn't wake up no matter what I did. So I had to call the makeup department into the trailer to make him up unconscious, totally out.
Sometimes Jan was awake, but barely able to work.
So what I did was I'd stand him in front of the camera for his shot. You know, as soon as he was steady enough, I'd say, roll camera. And as soon as I heard speed, I'd walk about 2 feet off because the shot was this tight. So I'd walk just out of frame. He would say his line. And as soon as cut was said, he would either turn and walk someplace or fall. And I would have to adjust myself to catch him.
Then, amid the day-to-day production problems, genuine tragedy struck the Airwolf set in January of 1985. Jan's close friend and stunt double Reed Rondell was killed when a helicopter crashed during a scene. The show and its troubled star seemed to be under a very dark cloud that put a deep shadow over Jan.
He brutalized himself, and that was physically, drugs, alcohol, relationships, right down the line.
I asked him once why he was destructive, which he blatantly was. And he said that he didn't know why anyone liked him.
Away from Airwolf, Jan's life was in turmoil. A 1984 bar fight left his opponent unconscious and earned Jan the nickname One Punch Vincent. He was acquitted of assault charges from that fight. Later that year, he allegedly choked a man at a Malibu party and pleaded guilty to disturbing the peace. In 1985, he tried to bring a measure of peace into the chaos.
Will you love her, comfort her, honor and keep her in sickness and in health, in richness or poverty, for better or worse, for the rest of your life? I will.
8 years after they started sneaking off together, Jan and Joanne were married. This home video was shot at the wedding, where hundreds of guests were invited to a lavish ceremony worthy of a primetime TV star.
Joanne, will you take Jan for your husband?
I do.
Will you love, comfort, honor, and keep him in sickness and in health, in richness or poverty, for better or worse, for the rest of your life?
I will.
But the peace in his life did not last.
Fidelity forever.
Just a month after he married Joanne, he was charged with hitting one of her childhood friends during a dispute at his house. Once again, Jan was found not guilty in court, but there were other fights that were kept out of court, fights that left his wife battered and hurt. Family friend Gigi Jeffers saw her after one of those fights.
She had bruises and she had dark glasses on, and she was just, you know, hiding and kind of shameful.
Joanne's father also saw injuries from his daughter's fights with Jan.
I must say I threatened to shoot him a couple of times, but never got around to it. She wouldn't leave him.
Jan has declined to comment about these allegations. Joanne wanted to save her marriage, and she believed the Jan that hurt her was not the real Jan.
And he would black out. He doesn't even remember because he's allergic to the alcohol. He doesn't even remember any of the times when he would, any of the things that he'd do. He was absolutely horrified when he'd come through. He'd hear messages on the answering machine that he'd leave, and he'd be just absolutely shocked. Oh my gosh, how could I talk to you like that? My God, you know, really shock him. And bruises, and you know, he didn't really even know what had happened. He'll say today, I don't know what happened. And he honestly doesn't.
Joanne convinced herself to stay with Jan, but the producers of Airwolf were finished with him. The show was dropped from the CBS schedule in 1986. An episode that had featured wheelchair-bound paraplegics summed up the situation for Deborah Pratt.
And these guys who didn't have legs, who were out there working, it was their shot to do a good show, had to do the take over and over and over and over and over and over and over again in the hot sun, because Jan couldn't remember his line when they got to the top of the hill. And finally, Jan passed out. And one of the guys said, you know, the wrong cripple is in the wheelchair.
When the E! True Hollywood story continues, Jan-Michael Vincent tries hard to sober up and bring out his best side.
He's a kid at heart, and he's a good person at heart.
In the difficult years after Airwolf, Jan-Michael Vincent was wrestling a fierce addiction to alcohol that threatened to wreck his career, ruin his marriage, and even end his life.
I go sober for a year at a time sometimes, and then I get lazy and slip back into it.
In the aftermath of his canceled series Airwolf, Jan-Michael Vincent fought his problems with substance abuse. He went through counseling and rehab, including a radical program of enzyme therapy in South Africa. To earn money, he worked in low-budget movies like Hit List. At odds with his wild reputation, and despite his addictions, Jan's good side still showed through. He'd always been involved in charities like the Horseback Special Olympics program in this home video and the Make-A-Wish Foundation for children with fatal diseases. His father-in-law remembers a Make-A-Wish event in Jan's hometown.
It was really, it makes me feel emotional right now. Treated them all as if they were his big brother, and it was so emotional. I had to go out. I couldn't stand it, you know. And he really was fantastic.
Jan was often the only celebrity at these small events. His friend Patrice Jennings explains his special bond with children's charities.
Probably one of the most appealing things about Jan is that he's a little kid inside. Definitely, he's a kid at heart, and he's a good person at heart.
Inevitably, Jan's self-destructive drinking began to dominate him again and change him, friend Gigi Jeffers remembers.
When alcohol is in that man, he is a different person. It changed personalities completely. Yeah. Total different person when he drank. Completely.
By the end of 1993, Jan's drinking was pushing his body, his mind, and his friends to the limits of their tolerance. His estranged wife, Joanne, partially blames herself.
I would cover up for him and really enable him, and it wasn't good, you know. So I felt really responsible in a lot of ways because I should have probably put my foot down and left a lot earlier.
But Joanne stayed with Jan until his alcohol-induced anger exploded during a day-long battle that spilled from their house into a local bar.
He went off on me in public, really bad, violent outburst. And it just struck me as the time to go. I was really afraid to go home.
Joanne stayed with her parents, but Jan could not accept the split.
Outraged, wanted her back completely, trying to find her, track her down, do whatever he could.
Joanne was scared and wanted to protect herself. In November 1994, she asked the courts for a temporary restraining order against Jan, and her allegations of a continuing pattern of physical abuse made tabloid headlines. In court documents, she claimed Jan had beaten her for years, breaking her nose and her ribs. She also alleged that he forced her to have sex with his friends and kicked one of her kittens to death during a rage.
By the time I got home, I think the press had already gotten hold of it, which was really a drag. So it was horrifying to have such a scandal by the time I got home.
The scandal sent Jan's skidding even worse and wilder. Just 2 weeks after Joanne's allegations, his Ford Bronco ran off the road and slammed into a canyon wall near his Malibu home. Jan was airlifted to a hospital, but he did not stay long because he was scheduled to work on a low-budget movie called Red Line. With an incredible feat of endurance, he made it to the set, where director John Sjogren was surprised to see him.
When he showed up, I said, they told me you had to stay in the hospital for a few days, and then he's like, no, aren't we filming today? I snuck out this morning, and I'm ready to go.
You had better shut your yap, little girl.
Redline co-star Chad McQueen was impressed.
I think I would have called in sick. You could see he still had his hospital wristband on, the blue band.
To account for his awful injuries, Jan improvised a few lines in the script.
I don't like walking around here looking like Frankenstein with zippers in my lips.
A few weeks later, most of his cuts had healed when Jan went to New York and appeared on the Howard Stern show. But doctors had discovered that he injured his right eye during the Malibu accident.
I see your one eye that isn't patched is almost fully closed.
And it looks like your lip is swollen.
Yeah. No, that's how
I got 180 stitches in here.
You're kidding. Off the air, Jan spoke about Joanne's allegations against him.
I never stomped no kitty. And that's the only thing I'm going to deny. The group sex.
Despite the damage caused by alcohol, Jan-Michael Vincent still had a long way to fall before he finally made the decision to quit drinking. To change his life, he would come within inches of losing it. When the E! True Hollywood story returns, a woman who loves Jan-Michael Vincent is unable to save him.
It's really hard for me to watch him destroy himself, and I think he thought I was going to come rescue him, and I just couldn't have.
When his marriage to Joanne collapsed, Jan-Michael Vincent sank into a deep and dangerous depression.
Well, I kind of had the poor me blues before I was getting a divorce. I didn't want that, and I just didn't know what I wanted. I wasn't real happy.
For a while, he lived with his loyal friend for more than 20 years, auto mechanic Bob Jennings.
He just drank a little too much. I couldn't control him as much as I'd like to have.
Jennings gave Joanne a gloomy report.
Bob, said that it was getting out of hand there, So he was, it was starting to get bad again, and he'd taken off. And Bob wasn't going to put up with it. He was there to try to be supportive and helpful, not be like me, covered up.
He was drinking more than he needed to be. I could see where he could do better, and he just could not see that.
Around 4 a.m. on March 18, 1995, police were called to this Los Angeles motel after an alleged altercation between Jan and a woman claiming to be his girlfriend. The incident ignited more bad publicity and left Jan looking for a place to go, but Joanne would not take him back.
He knew it's really hard for me to watch him destroy himself, and I think he thought I was going to come rescue him, and I just couldn't. It was really hard. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, is walk away from him. And, wonder whether I'm doing the right thing.
Then, out of nowhere, Karen Thompson, A woman who had known Jan since childhood saw the tabloid headlines.
I thought, gee, his mom must be rolling over in her grave. And I thought, I wonder if he'd like to hear from an old buddy. So I got the number from his dad and called him.
I just took off with her. But I was going through a lot of changes right then.
Jan moved in with Karen Thompson, but even this lucky break could not stop his slide. He found a younger girlfriend, a woman in her 20s named Nicole Wallace, and he kept drinking. He was in no shape to work when he showed up for a one-day job on a film called No Rest for the Wicked, produced by William Busick.
I'd feed him the lines, and he'd answer the lines like they were questions, instead of reciting what I'd tell him, you know, so it started to get a bit frustrating.
Did Adam give you any description of this nun? No, what about you? What do you know? No, wait. You asked me, say, did Adam give you any description of the nun? Did Adam give you any...
No Rest for the Wicked was directed by John Sjogren, who had also worked with Jan on Red Line.
I thought Jan would be able to do at least what he did in Red Line, if not more so. But he had gotten much worse by the time we tried to do the next one.
Well, we found the pistol.
Skip on down, get the last
Just say, William, we don't even think of leaving town, William. I know what I'm saying.
I was scared. I thought he was just going to die. I was really, every time the phone would ring, I would think, oh my Lord, you know, I'm going to get this call one day that his liver's given out, because I could tell on the phone talking to him. And I'd seen him a couple times and stuff, you know, and his body was giving out.
Joanne got the call she feared, but the reason was not what she expected. On August 26, 1996, just a few days after his No Rest for the Wicked job, Jan and his young girlfriend Nicole Wallace pushed a broken-down Mazda into this service station, where Eddie DeLaura was a mechanic.
The battery was going dead, the car came in dead.
DeLaura said Jan seemed drunk when he dropped off the Mazda, and even drunker when he came back later to pick it up.
I think he was just way too drunk to even get behind the wheel, to let alone know what he was doing.
Police later found the level of alcohol in Jan's blood was more than twice the legal limit. He tried to tie a surfboard onto the Mazda.
He couldn't get the surfboard tied to his roof. He was just kind of wobbling back and forth.
His girlfriend helped him tie the surfboard, then drove away. Jan tried to catch up with her. As he pulled behind her, he was legally drunk and having vision problems in the eye that he injured during the Malibu wreck a year and a half earlier. Jan says he never expected Nicole to stop for a yellow light that summer afternoon. He slammed into the back of her car, then spun out and crashed into a metal pole. His face was cut and slashed. One front tooth was knocked out, but worst of all, his neck was broken. A variation of a hangman's fracture, doctors at the hospital called it, an injury that either kills its victims right away or leaves them with a good chance for a full recovery. With tubes down his throat and his head locked into a metal halo, Jan-Michael Vincent may not have considered himself lucky in his bed in intensive care. But at that moment, despite everything he had lost over the past 30 years, he was probably the luckiest man alive. When the E! True Hollywood story returns, from fallen star to miracle survivor, Jan-Michael Vincent tries to learn from his brush with death.
My driving habits are different. I don't drive.
A broken neck has made a big difference in Jan-Michael Vincent's life.
Well, I've definitely changed. I haven't changed basically, but I've changed my ways and how I behave, how I think things through. My driving habits are different. I don't drive.
After his accident, Jan-Michael Vincent faced months of grueling physical therapy that left him with a new and simple rule.
If you drink, you pay.
Jan pleaded guilty to drunk driving after the 1996 accident, and a judge ordered him into an alcohol rehab program.
You're not always going to live fast, die young, and have beautiful memories. Life has got a little consequence.
Life has written its consequences on Jan-Michael Vincent's face. Few people are born with such physical perfection, and very few people have gone to such extremes to ravage their gifts in the public eye. Yet when Jan appeared on the Howard Stern Show in 1997, he looked better than he had looked in years, and he seemed ready to face a future he never expected to see.
Are you the toughest man on the planet?
Them all.
No.
No?
I wouldn't go that far.
When he got out of rehab, Jan moved back in with Karen Thompson to live quietly, and he reached a truce with his estranged wife, Joanne. He's eager to act again, plus he's planning to write a book, and he's doing his best to stay sober as he looks back on his amazing life.
I made it pretty good. Well, I can walk. Chris Reeves got his neck broken and he's not walking.
Cursed with his addiction to alcohol, yet charmed with an unbelievable ability to survive, Jan-Michael Vincent pushed his real life beyond any screen role. He paid a very high price, but he learned a valuable truth.
When you go through rehab and you meet a lot of people that have had problems with drinking, you aren't the only one. You realize that. And the worst thing that happens to you is get hooked up with that bottle. You want to know about the lipstick on my Levi's, and you're telling me I ought to be ashamed. You got me sneaking in, wondering where I've been, and you're telling me your friends all claim it was me they saw with good old what's her name. I've never been a cowboy either, like I said. Not bad for a snake-bit, gut-shot, broke-leg dog dragging 9 sucking puppies uphill.
Yes, sir. I'm gonna catch him before this day is done.
Still here, after all these years.